A person once reached a moment in life where silence felt heavier than noise, where the absence of recognition hurt more than open criticism, and where the most painful question was not, "Who am I?" but "Why does no one seem to see me?" From the outside, this person looked ordinary, even invisible, blending so well into the expectations of others that the original self had slowly faded into the background like a forgotten reflection in a dusty mirror. Every morning began with the same ritual, adjusting words, gestures, expressions, and even thoughts so they would fit into the emotional climate of whoever stood in front of them. Approval became a currency, smiles became survival tools, and disagreement felt like danger. Over time, the person forgot when this strategy had begun, only that it had become necessary, automatic, and exhausting. In Jungian terms, the persona had grown thick and rigid. The mask meant to help the individual function in society had taken over the face beneath it. People responded warmly to this persona. They praised it. They trusted it. They relied on it. Yet every compliment felt strangely hollow, as if it were meant for someone else. When people admired the person, the admiration slid off without sinking in. When they criticized, it pierced deeply, because criticism threatened the mask, and the mask was all that seemed to exist. This contradiction created a quiet suffering. Being valued by others, yet feeling worthless inside. Being needed, yet feeling unseen. Being praised, yet feeling fake. The person began to notice a pattern. When they tried harder to be pleasing, people seemed comfortable but distant. When they spoke carefully, they were liked but not understood. When they agreed, they were accepted but never chosen. It was as if their presence served a function rather than held value. Jung once suggested that what we repress does not disappear, it returns in disguised forms. In this case, the repressed self returned as resentment, fatigue, and a growing sense of emptiness. The unconscious began to protest. Sleep became restless. Dreams filled with images of locked rooms, broken mirrors, forgotten children, and voices calling from behind walls. At first, the person blamed others. They don't appreciate me, they thought. They take me for granted. This belief felt justified because it was partially true. But Jung warned that when we repeatedly encounter the same problem in different relationships, we must ask whether something within us is participating in its creation. Slowly, painfully, the person began to realize that others could not see their worth clearly because they themselves had never fully claimed it. They had offered usefulness instead of truth, compliance instead of presence, safety instead of depth. People responded accordingly. Recognition from others, the person discovered, is not a mirror of who we are, but a reflection of what we present. And what had been presented was not the soul, but the strategy. The persona had been shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. Fear, however, cannot command genuine respect. It can only negotiate tolerance. The unconscious knew this long before the conscious mind accepted it. One evening, after a particularly draining interaction where the person had been praised extensively yet felt completely erased, something shifted. The exhaustion crossed a threshold and turned into clarity. For the first time, the person asked a different question: what part of me am I hiding to remain acceptable? This question did not bring immediate answers. Instead, it brought discomfort. Jung believed that growth begins when we turn toward what we avoid. And what this person had avoided was their own shadow. The rejected qualities, the unexpressed opinions, the anger, the needs, the limits, the rawness. The shadow did not appear as something evil. It appeared as something alive. It held assertiveness, contradiction, independence, and even selfishness, traits that had been judged unacceptable early in life. Somewhere along the way, the person had learned that love was conditional, that worth had to be earned through adaptation. The shadow carried the parts that refused that bargain. And because those parts had been denied expression, they had been denied recognition, not only by others, but by the person themselves. As the individual began to listen inwardly, relationships started to change in subtle but unsettling ways. When the person stopped agreeing automatically, some people became uncomfortable. When they expressed a genuine opinion, silence followed. When they set a boundary, they were accused of changing. At first, this felt like proof of worthlessness. But Jung would say that this is often the moment when the psyche tests its new orientation. Recognition does not disappear when you claim your worth. It becomes selective. Those who valued the mask withdraw. Those who resonate with the self remain or appear for the first time. The person noticed something else as well. The more they honored their inner truth, the less desperate they felt for external validation. This was not arrogance. It was grounding. It was the quiet confidence that comes from alignment. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming who one truly is, not who one is expected to be. As this process unfolded, recognition from others lost its addictive quality. Praise was appreciated but no longer needed for survival. Criticism was considered but no longer devastating. The emotional center of gravity moved inward. People now reacted differently. Some admired the person more deeply, even if they spoke less praise. Some resisted, sensing unconsciously that the old dynamic was gone. Others treated the person with a new respect that felt unfamiliar and almost unsettling. This respect was not loud. It did not flatter. It was quiet, steady, and grounded. It came from the recognition of boundaries, presence, and authenticity. For the first time, when someone said, "I respect you," the person felt it land in the body, not just the ears. The individual realized that worth is not something others bestow, it is something others detect. And what they detect depends on what we embody. When a person lives from the persona, others relate to the function. When a person lives from the self, others sense depth, even if they cannot name it. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through feeling before language. People may not articulate why they treat someone differently, but they respond to inner coherence instinctively. There was still loneliness. Claiming one's worth does not guarantee belonging. In fact, it often reduces the number of places where one fits superficially. But the quality of connection changed. Conversations became fewer, but more real. Relationships became less crowded, but more honest. The person learned that being overlooked while being authentic hurt less than being praised while being false. This was not a victory over others. It was a reconciliation with the self. Eventually, the person understood something essential. The eyes of others are not mirrors to seek identity in, but surfaces upon which our inner posture casts a shadow. Stand bent inward, and the shadow looks small. Stand upright in truth, and the shadow gains form. Recognition follows presence, not performance. Respect follows boundaries, not sacrifice. Love follows authenticity, not adaptation. In the end, the person no longer asked whether others saw their worth. They asked whether they were living in a way that allowed worth to exist at all. And in that shift, something remarkable happened. Even when unseen, they felt real. Even when unpraised, they felt solid. Even when alone, they felt accompanied by themselves. That, in Jungian terms, is the moment when the individual stops seeking recognition from the world and becomes recognizable to it naturally, not because they demand it, but because they finally inhabit who they are. Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.